our big thing is magic and wonder, whether that be literal magic tricks like Milo or just the magic of okay, we're creating a base reality with this puppet, and it's a stand-in for us as the audience, and then all of a sudden it can do something that is impossible for a human actor to do.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. We're your hosts, Adam Kreutinger
and Cameron Garrity.
And today we have Alex and Olmsted on the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Puppeteer world. Hello, Cam. Hello, Adam.
Hello, friends.
Hello. It is so good to have you both here. For anybody who doesn't know, Alex and Olmsted they are the wonderful performing group behind some of our favorite slam acts like Milo the Magnificent. They also have an incredible repertory company that they work with in doing all sorts of other really wonderful puppet shows, and we can't wait to learn more about them and hear about all the wonderful building and performing work that they do. So Alex, Vernon, Sarah Olmsted Thomas, Alex and Olmsted, welcome to Puppeteers.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
This is all coming full circle, because I was so excited when you all started the podcast, because I spend a lot of time, like a lot of puppet builders, in the workshop, headphones in, either listening to podcasts or audiobooks. So it's become a familiar background soundtrack to my workshop.
Exactly. That's part of why I wanted to start it too, because I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and sometimes you don't want to listen to a puppet thing, but you know what? The thing is, puppet building takes so long. You could listen to a whole bunch of a variety of things, and sometimes it's nice to get into the head of some other puppeteers. Absolutely,
and I really love the variety too. As a puppeteer, having people like Ronnie on, and Jim Krupa and Jean Marie Keevens, and who we all know, some better than others, but being able to get sort of a bigger picture of their life and philosophy and experience. It's so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of which, why don't we start off with what you guys are working on now?
Well. Let's just dive into the National Capital Puppetry Festival. Ooh. So Alex and I are on the board of the National Capital Puppet Guild, and the Guild is organizing its first ever festival, and it's going to be virtual, and it's going to be later this month.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, we were, National Capital Puppetry Guild is sort of, an offshoot of Puppeteers of America. It's the local regional guild for the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And we were going to be involved in a live puppet festival sort of in the Northeast area around this time before the pandemic hit. But now that all that went kaflurfy, we decided, okay, let's really refocus, still try and put on an online festival, see what that looks like, employ some puppeteers during this shutdown, and still be able to share puppetry with people. So that's been a whole new adventure of like, how do you plan an online festival? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's interesting too, especially since it was a somewhat regional one. Now, is it open to anybody who wants to participate, or are you still trying to keep it pretty regional?
Well, registration is open to anyone in the world. In terms of the puppeteers and teaching artists we brought on, we did make it a priority, especially for the performances, to employ local artists to the region, to the National Capital Region, Maryland, Virginia, DC. And then beyond that, just expanding a little bit. It feels a little bit like a local thing on the one hand, but on the other hand, we have workshops led by teaching artists from around the country, and even one from across the pond.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think there's something really great about a regional festival, especially in the before times, because it is great to kind of see who those people are immediately kind of in your cohort, that you guys are able to continue to facilitate that kind of community, I think is really important. And it's good to see you guys are doing that.
I think the whole philosophy of like a regional festival is so important for puppeteers, because like when you're starting out, that's how you find your group of people, and that's how you make those connections. Because I know, like, as people starting out in puppetry, you're not sure where to turn to. So you may search online, you may sort of find out about a show that's coming through town, or like a local theater that's doing things. But really, it's like getting in touch with your guild and going to a festival and meeting all the other people that you keep running into, seeing shows and in workshops, and you keep saying like, oh, well, like, what else is going on, or how do you make that, or like, can I try your puppet on?
Yeah.
Like those in-person connections are so important. So hopefully we'll still get a sense of that online.
That's really excellent. And when is the date for that festival?
Yes, it'll be the weekend of August 21st through 23rd.
Oh, perfect. So this
2 weeks.
Well, actually, and this show is coming out on the 19th of August. So this is perfect timing. So people are hearing about it now, and so this weekend for people.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
yes,
all
because-
the information is down in the description below, so be sure to check
Yes.
it out.
That's right, nationalcapitalpuppetry.org, and down in the description. And happy August 19th to everyone, because we're in the present.
Wonderful. Something else that you guys have been working on that I really have been enjoying watching, and I've actually, I work at a college, and there's a lot of people who need tech support every once in a while, especially as we're in the Zoom age. I've been loving your videos online, your YouTube tutorials, especially I'm specifically talking about the green screen one that you guys did, and they're just so much fun and very they break down everything in a really nice way. And what made you decide to start doing some of those build and tutorial videos?
Good question. I think it really the structure of it came from last semester. I was teaching a puppetry class at University of Maryland, and as through their theater, dance, and performing arts program. And it was halfway through the semester when it all turned to distance learning, online stuff. So that was an adventure. Adam, as a teacher, I'm sure you can commiserate.
Oh,
with
absolutely.
Having
it was
all of a
definitely
sudden
changing gears.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, right? So this was my first time teaching a university level course, and then having to shift halfway through for, okay, how do you teach puppet building and manipulation all via webcam? So that turned into, making weekly asynchronous teaching videos, and then also assigning some, puppet film projects for them to work on, and then giving feedback. And it ended up, Sarah and I both sort of collaborated on a lot of those, sort of how to write puppet shows and how to generate ideas, and some building stuff too.
Yeah, Alex had to make a shift in part because the students who themselves had to shift to submitting their work on video and creating pieces were asking these questions. I don't even know how to write a show. How do you write a show? Let alone build the puppet. But for that sort of was the impetus for Alex to shift his curriculum that was originally planned for in-person, and then to bring me on board so that we can really attack the nuts and bolts of storytelling and simple things like found object puppetry. What can you do with your limited resources in a situation where you're compromised mentally and literally within a home? All of the shifts, especially at the beginning, that were so dramatic, as a way of encouraging the students, and that kind of gave us the impetus to continue that trajectory of what can we offer on a weekly basis. This is a good structure for us to focus on. And
yeah, we really liked that weekly deadline of every week we have to put out something. Even not so much of a we need to keep that audience hooked, but like in this crazy time, it gives us structure of, cool, what are we going to focus on this week? How are we going to structure it? How are we going to think about it beforehand to write out a script and think about instructional steps as clearly as possible? We really
Wow.
Love it.
That's so awesome. What kind of students did you have in the group? Because I assume there's no puppetry major in this. Was it mostly theater students or art students?
It was, I think, mostly theater students, theater majors. And then we had some English students and also some students that were just like, I don't know, it sounded like fun.
Yeah.
So it was so cool. Like,
There's a Jim Henson statue in the quad, so might as well.
Exactly. University of Maryland is his alma mater.
Right.
So it was so interesting, being there and continuing that like puppetry education legacy. It was so fun. It was 12 students with varying levels of experience, both in performing and building, and basically every week was a different style of puppetry. So we would do, super simple direct manipulation, kind of found object stuff one week. The first half of the class build something, the second half of the class create a piece with it and perform it and get feedback. We would do shadow puppetry, we'd do rod puppetry, we'd do toy theater. It was just so fun.
Yeah. One thing that's I'm curious about is what were you able to get a sense of what the students' expectations were coming in? Because we all have a good sense of like what puppetry can be and how diverse it is. But I can imagine that perhaps some college students who are taking this as what looks like a fun elective might have preconceived notions of what to expect. And I imagine anything you did was probably a bit different than maybe what they expected.
Yeah, I definitely touched base like the first day, hey, let's sit around and chat and set up what the expectations are for this class and why did you sign up for it? And several of the students said, oh, I signed up for it because, 2 or 3 semesters ago when they last offered the puppetry class, they took that and really enjoyed it. And every time they offer a puppetry class, they get a different guest teacher. So it's not always the same curriculum. It's like, oh, here's this puppet theater person who really focuses on film stuff. And their projects the whole semester were film-based. So there were several of those students. There were several students who were theater people that wanted to, sort of round out their whole package and get that, I guess, quadruple threat of skills. Yeah. And then, some people that were like, it looked interesting. Yeah. Like, it looked fun. So hopefully it was.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I love that. Well, would love to go back a little bit and talk about how you guys got started in all of this. Where did either of you first find puppetry?
Well, I feel like it's twofold. I feel like we can share a little bit about puppetry in the before Sarah and Alex merged times, and then how we met, which is an unusual kind of puppetry moment. But I'll say that growing up, I loved Bread and Puppet, and I saw them in Vermont in the summers, and their giant circuses and huge puppets loomed quite large in my imagination.
Yeah, I don't know if I have as specific as a puppetry connection when I was a kid. Certainly there were, puppets on TVs, and I'm sure my parents took me to see some puppet shows. But I think my biggest connection was just like loved playing with toys, which is like, I feel like what really translates through a lot of puppeteers' love is like, oh my God, I get to play with a toy that comes to life and plays back. So that sort of love and investment in this isn't just a stuffed animal, this is a character, and I know their backstory, and they need to be comfortable in bed when I get up in the morning and leave them so that when I come back, they're not flopping over to the side. And then we both were working as sort of gigging actors in the DC area in 2009, and we got hired to perform in a show, a devised show called Hopa Tropa, which was a Bulgarian folk show, and that was heavily based around found object puppetry. So we worked with the master puppeteer Julia Tasheva on that show and sort of learned the more formal basic training of puppetry and just totally, fell in love with it and had so much fun and totally got the bug, Then we worked on a few more shows together, some that involved puppetry, some that were just acting, and then we started making our own pieces.
Wow, so you just said you were gigging acting. What kind of acting was it? Was it was stage, or was it some film stuff as well?
Well, mostly stage. I did do a commercial for the Virginia Lottery.
Oh, cool.
And I was
Did you win?
I was a background actor on the season 1 finale of Veep.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
there is a scene in a Baltimore hotel in which 2 characters are sitting in chairs, and I blurrily pass in the foreground.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm going to have to, I absolutely love that show. And I'll have to go and check that out now.
I guarantee, unless I give you the timestamp, you won't be able to tell who I am. It was such an experience. It was my first and only time doing background acting, and oh my gosh, if anybody out there has any kind of interest in doing film or TV, definitely try and get a gig as a background actor, just so you can see the reality, right? Because there's the romance both of TV and film and podcasts and theater and puppetry, where you're like, oh yeah, I get to go do the thing I love. And then the reality of I'm sitting in a holding pen with 50 other actors who are all like handing each other business cards, trying to make networking connections. And then a guy comes in every 4 hours and is like, okay, have you been on screen yet? No? Okay, we need you to walk in front holding a newspaper and don't say anything.
Adam had an experience
It
like
was
that.
I was in the Marshall movie with Chadwick Boseman and Josh Gad. It was what an experience it was, just being an extra in that. You'd never see me, same kind of thing. You'd never see me. You'd have to freeze frame and look way in the background of the courtroom to see me. But man, was it an experience. Being able to see these people like acting in real time and stuff, and getting the courage to walk up to them and say hi. And then taking the time.
Seinfeld, Elaine. Miss Louise Dreyfus. Yeah.
Yeah. It was absolutely remarkable, and it was. Same thing. A lot of sitting around. The one day I waited for 10 hours just to be used for like 15 minutes. But again, that's showbiz. But it was again, like you're saying though, you learn so much just seeing everything going on. And I'll tell you too, even just it's a great way to meet other performers, because you're sitting around for 10 hours. You get to talk to all these other people who are extras too, and you hear such interesting stories and meet wonderful people.
Oh my gosh. And the more you can shift from if you're stuck in a room with another person in your same profession, the more you can shift to like learning about them or trying to start up a conversation that isn't about what you both do. Like, that's my favorite thing in the world, like meeting somebody at a puppetry festival and definitely talking to them about puppetry, but also like one of the first questions I ask is like, okay, what do you love to do besides puppetry? Like you get such an insight into people.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. So that being said, what are some things you know?
Oh, nothing. I only love to do puppetry.
No, I guess a question I had. So then you were doing acting before. I know you kind of mentioned that you did puppetry younger, more as play. So then would you say that you were an actor before you called yourself a puppeteer?
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah and I both went to school and majored in theater, and we're totally just like on the theater acting, live theater sort of track. So working sort of freelance with different theater companies around the DC area, doing probably four different productions a year, sort of gigging.
Yeah, I have a dance background, and so when I fell in love with theater, I was more drawn to physical comedy and things that required a lot of movement. And so then the introduction to puppetry felt like this really perfect merging of my interests, because puppetry is so based in movement and choreography. And then, of course, we both have a funny bone, and so comedy is also central to to the work that we make. But I will say that definitely having a dance background drew me into puppetry in a really, really intense way because of the movement associated with manipulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think us approaching puppetry from a theater background definitely has influenced all of our work. Yeah. Whereas, starting with, okay, we're doing a show, we're doing a theatrical show, it's about the story, and let's use the puppets to tell that story, as opposed to maybe starting with, okay, I want to do a puppet show, now let's figure out what that is.
No, absolutely, yeah. I think it's so important. More and more we talk to people who have an acting background, and I think it can be such an asset to someone starting off as a puppeteer, having some sort of a performing background, because it takes a lot of courage to get up and do a show, and even just being involved in other productions can kind of help ease your way into performing, because as much as in a puppet show, the attention isn't necessarily on the performer as much as it is the puppet. There's still there's not much other things to hide behind, because a lot of times it's so focused on that one object. So if you do make a mistake or something, there's it just takes any live performance takes a lot of courage.
Absolutely.
It does take courage. I still get nervous backstage. That rush of adrenaline that really affects the body. Sometimes it's a sense of like the chest swelling. Sometimes there's a bit of nausea or it's in the stomach. There is literally a physical response to the adrenaline rush and nervousness associated with being backstage and going into a performance. I imagine it's the same for athletes before having to do a show. Before having to do a show.
Yeah, for the audience.
For the audience.
Yeah, in the big outdoor theater.
I mean, listen, theater is a metaphor for life. Let's just...
Yeah, it's amazing how that still almost no matter how much you perform, that still happens. So I think people say that goes away the more you perform, which I think can be true in some cases, but I think it's more so getting comfortable with that feeling rather than making it go away.
Bingo.
Yeah. Bingo. Ding, ding, ding. Adam gets the gold star.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Yeah, it's like you need that adrenaline to channel as much as you can through the audience, but you can't let it overtake you.
It's like a dance.
Yeah, I remember in college I used to psych myself up right before a show by playing this weird mind game with myself, where right before I stepped out on stage, I would tell myself, "Oh, what if I forgot my first line?" just to be like, "Ugh."
Put yourself on edge. Yeah, no, because that reminds me of another saying that people just say, like, if you're not being nervous shows that you care about it too. That
Right. Yeah. Because
yes, I agree.
Because you shouldn't be going out there and feeling so comfortable that you can just go on autopilot.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because if you go on autopilot, you're also not listening to the audience. And so much of live performance is listening to the audience, getting that feedback, having... we often do this sort of symbol when we talk about the audience-performer relationship, which is like...
sort of like an infinity. It comes from me, translates out to the audience.
Right.
They perceive it, think about it, respond to it, which then comes back to me and affects how I proceed with the next part of the story. It's this constant dialogue.
Yeah.
Constant.
Yeah, if you're just going out there and doing your show exactly the same every time, why not just record it and put it up somewhere, sell the
exactly.
DVD?
How long have you been doing
absolutely.
live performances?
Great question. I'm going to think about that for just a little minute, and I'll let Alex answer first.
I got into live performing in middle school, school plays. I was involved in an after-school activity called Odyssey of the Mind. Are either of you familiar with it?
So about a year ago, we talked with Liz Hara, wonderful puppeteer and writer from Sesame Street and the Helpsters and so many other things. But she had done Odyssey of the Mind as a kid, and it sounded like a really incredible program.
It's fantastic. It's a great combination of creative problem solving and performance, which the more I progress in my career, the more I realize like I'm basically just doing OM as an adult, which is like, great, solve a problem, find a creative way to present it, build a puppet, do a show.
Dude, thank you, OM.
Right?
Yeah.
So OM definitely was a huge influence to me of this can be really fun and I can make my own work. And then that just got me more interested in doing the school shows. And then when I went off to college, I was like, well, I got to major in something. I liked doing plays. Let me keep doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
There was definitely a moment early on in DC theater when we were gigging and doing these different projects and just feeling like a little starved for work that we really cared about, that we were completely invested in, that we weren't just pulled out of the pool as the lucky one that got the gig, that didn't have the voice in the rehearsal room, just had to stand and deliver, like feeling like we were searching and we hadn't found what we were looking for. And that's when we started signing up for open mics at this theater that hosted something called Clown Cabaret, and they gave everyone 10 minutes. There were jugglers, there were clowns, there were mimes, musicians, and we started just requesting these slots, not knowing what we were going to do, which was a deadline. And we tried all kinds of things. Some were more successful than others, but it was because of that shift that we made to take a big risk and try something new that we ended up meeting the people that are kind of a part of our theater family now. Happenstance Theater, for example, the other company we work with, we've been working with them since 2012. We would not have met them if it hadn't been for this, and we make shows with them, and we've learned so much from making shows with them. But there was just that moment of needing to throw the spaghetti on the wall. Like, we know we love theater, but it doesn't feel like we've found our people, and by doing that is how we found puppetry too. We tried our first puppet act.
Yeah, we debuted Milo as
Yes.
a puppetry piece at the DC Clown Cabaret, and it was a great place to try out new material, find out what the audience responds to, who the character is. And then we tried out a totally separate piece with Milo at another Clown Cabaret. And somebody came up to us after the show and were like, hey, do you know about Black Cherry Puppet Theater up in Baltimore? They do puppet slams. And we were like, what's a puppet slam? And
oh
then,
boy, did we find out.
yeah, and then
Yeah, I
that
was
just sort
gonna
of
say.
opened the door. And then we were like, oh my God, short form puppet theater. Like, that's our favorite thing in the world.
That
Yeah.
audience
That's
must have
amazing.
eaten up Milo, because I can imagine that's a very, very appreciative audience for that type of a performance.
It's just so much fun. We love performing Milo. We love performing at really any puppet slam. It's so fun.
Yeah, Milo has a special place in my heart. It's probably my favorite puppet thing I've ever seen, especially since, I don't know if you know, I started off my performing career as a magician, doing magic shows all over Western New York. So I remember the first time I saw Milo, I think it was at the Yukon we were talking about,
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah,
Adam and I
in
were
2015.
Oh my
we were sitting
gosh.
next to
I
each
was
other at Bin, and
Oh
we
my God.
saw it for the first time. And I had heard Bo Brown raving about Milo for a year or two prior, but when we
Oh,
finally
we love
got that
Bo.
opportunity to see it, it was just
It
oh
is
my God.
absolutely, it had everything I love in a performance. Absolutely everything. It's my absolute favorite thing. And actually, a question on top of that I have you performed? So you said you've done that for slams and some of these other conventions. Did you ever do that type of performance or the Milo show with like in theaters for a lay audience?
Yeah, we've done. So after creating a few different sort of slam-length versions of Milo in 2017, was it? or 16?
2017 is when we did the full length.
Yeah, so in 2017 we got a grant from the Henson Foundation to develop it into a full-length show. So then we got to develop it into about a 40-minute show, try it out at Black Cherry, that's where it had its premiere. And then we've been able to perform around the world with it since then, sometimes at festivals, sometimes just at a theater like in Detroit.
Oh, yes.
We did it at the Detroit Institute of Arts, which is an incredible venue, and they have all sorts of guest performers come in. So a lot of the people that were seeing it weren't necessarily puppetry people, or they didn't see a lot of puppetry. So we love talking to those people after the show and sort of getting those reactions of like, I didn't know that's what puppetry could be. You know, like so many people have, especially in America, an idea of what puppetry is, and it's such a vast, broad spectrum.
Absolutely.
No, definitely. And actually, I realize we've danced around it a little bit, but can you guys explain what Milo the Magnificent is for people who are maybe not familiar with that act?
Absolutely. Milo is an aspiring magician and entertainer, and he arrives ready to present his magic tricks that he's been practicing in his living room for the first time for a live audience. And as you can imagine, things don't always go as planned. And he has this wonderful expression that he often flips to, which is of nervousness, because he's constantly relating to the crowd. And when something goes wrong, he clicks into that place of fear, problem solving, how am I going to get through this? I guess the long and short of it being that he's a magician and he's a new performer.
Right. And the puppet itself is basically two-dimensional. It sort of looks like an illustration. He sort of hangs around my neck about mid-torso level. My hands and feet slip through the ends of his clothes to act as his. And then he sort of has a 2D circular face where the expressions can flip up and down, like as if you held a book sideways. So he has 9 different expressions that he can sort of flip through. So it's a little like mask theater too.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely remarkable, and the expression is just on point and so relatable. You know, a question made me wonder though: did you guys have any background in magic in any way before this?
Oh yeah.
I love magic. I am such a big fan of magic. I think and the more people I talk to, that either are magicians or puppeteers that like magic, is like magic and puppetry are totally the same.
I mean, let's be honest.
Right? It's like, you know, when you see a magic show or you see a magic trick happen, and you have that moment of, it's not even a willing suspension of disbelief. It's, oh my God, like for a second, I couldn't comprehend what was going on. Yeah. And I was totally convinced that something disappeared, something reappeared, something transformed. My expectations were totally just blown, which is like a great puppet show too, right? You're watching the show, your brain is divided and simultaneously acknowledging I'm seeing somebody move an object and I'm totally invested in that character succeeding.
That object is alive.
Yeah. So like that's total magic. Milo is basically like me at 12.
Yeah.
If Alex had ever gone on stage with the magic skills that I had.
Wow. That's so
I
cool.
was super into magic and juggling and circus arts and everything like that. I grew up in Middle Tennessee, and so a lot of my free time was spent just poring over juggling books and magic books and learning tricks in my room and never really performing them for anyone, like sometimes running downstairs and showing my mom or dad. And that trick going totally wrong.
Yeah.
Like I'd go to do the French drop and it would drop out of my hand and I'd pick it up and go, okay, wait. Okay, watch again,
Yeah.
And
No,
then
that's so
running
it's
up.
so cool to hear all this too, because one thing I think is really interesting and what makes Milo performing magic more interesting, I think, than even a real magic show. It's kind of like the difference between like a magic trick and an illusion, because at least in the skits that I've seen Milo do, I don't think it's necessarily a matter of fooling the audience as much as it is almost like juggling, in that, like, wow, look, we know how it's done, but look how awesome and impressive it is, and how it, this illusion is captured. And I'm thinking specifically, like when you do that that almost Looney Tune illusion with the hands coming out of different spots. I don't imagine that most people are wondering, like, oh, how is it done, in the same way you would with a formal magic trick, but you still have that overwhelmingly delight that the audience has because of how beautiful the illusion looks, and almost more like they're a part of it because they probably do kind of understand how it's done. So they almost feel like they're in on the secret and they're part of it. It's more special.
Absolutely. That was always our goal from the beginning, is we don't want to make it a magic show in which we're trying to fool them and they don't know how it's done. We want to show them exactly how it's done, and their role as the audience still being impressed and like when he brings out the ball in front and he covers it with his hand, and Sarah, as the puppeteer, takes it away and he ta-das it. Like, we purposefully make sure that the lights don't hide us so that they can see, oh my god, these are just puppeteers, like, doing the easiest thing. But when he does his ta-da pose, everyone explodes in applause because they know, oh, we're playing the audience that is convinced that this is real.
And also because we so clearly invited them in on the game. Right at the very beginning, the game is clear. They are a part of it. And their enthusiasm for applauding a moment that was so obviously done with me taking the ball away and Milo, not actually disappearing it, is in part because they've been given this very clear invitation to play along.
Yeah. I think it's also like, Milo comes out totally stage fright at the beginning of the show, and I built that in because I was like, oh, when I'm nervous at the top of the show, like, let me just be nervous through Milo, get that first, like, get him on our side, and then Milo is sort of the audience surrogate for any time they've felt nervous in front of a crowd. So the audience wants him to succeed because it's like, yeah, he's the underdog. He's us when we have to get up and give a presentation. Like, we want him to do well.
Yeah. One thing it has me wondering is, I imagine that I wouldn't say that your show is a kid show by any stretch of the imagination, but I imagine sometimes you have a younger audience there. Do they appreciate that kind of peek behind the curtain for the magic, seeing how it's done as much? I mean, because I can see, an adult audience very much thinking that's very funny and engaging, but I could see a kid perhaps not necessarily understanding that, perhaps. Have you ever noticed that, out of curiosity?
That's a great question. We more often than not open up a Q&A at the end of the show, sort of a dog and pony, allowing the audience to ask questions and show some of the puppets up close, how they work. The questions from the children in the audience are extraordinary.
To go back to your previous question with the Milo's arm going in a box and a identical box on the other side of the stage, his arm coming out of it, like, we built that as, okay, you obviously know how this is done, right? Like, we're not hiding it from the audience. Almost every show, there's a kid in the audience who's like, how did you make his arm teleport?
And whenever they ask a question like this, our response is, well, if you had a magic show and you needed an arm that went into one box and disappeared and came out the other, how would you do it?
And then we'll take, 4 or 5 different suggestions from the audience before we reveal either how it was done or we don't reveal anything. But it's so interesting hearing these kids come up with solutions. Sort of going back to that OM thing. What is your creative way to solve this problem? So like at one point, Milo does the classic sort of sawn in half illusion on his pet mouse assistant, and at the end, the mouse, flops in half again and chases its upper half with its lower half until Milo can fix it. And they have a lot of questions about like, how did you cut the mouse in half and put it back together? And so we'll always, throw that out to the audience. How would you do it? So there's a lot of, suggestions of tape and Velcro and magnets and a second mouse and like all sorts of stuff.
And just like for the hands in the boxes, some kids offer that there is actually a tunnel that goes underneath one table and comes up to the other that allows these objects to travel from one box to the other. And I suppose this is a roundabout way of answering your question about how the kind of the nuanced play that might be more direct for the adults in the crowd, does that read to the kiddos? And I'd say that even if they're not picking up on that, the magic of appear and disappear is still pretty satisfying.
Oh, absolutely. And I, even as I was asking that question, I was realizing too that the kids, kids always ask kind of, funny, interesting questions that make them of what they're wondering, but chances are they were so entertained anyway, just because of the tone of it, that whatever the answer to that question is, it wouldn't necessarily matter to them. It's just because, they ask all kind of fun questions. Because one thing that the Milo show really reminds me of, it's almost like a live Pixar show, in that it's really for a whole, so many different levels of entertainment going on for the audience that can really hit all the different demographics of mostly age demographics of the people in really strong ways.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's the goal.
We want there to be something for everyone in the crowd.
Yeah.
For all of the shows we make, we don't want anyone to feel excluded for not being able to get something. Like there might be something that's more appropriate for one age group than another, as in someone who is more mature would pick up on the little humor there, but that doesn't mean that it can't be enjoyed across the spectrum. It's something we talk about a lot.
Yeah, we want it to be, I think everything we do is all ages appropriate. We don't want to exclude anybody from seeing the show, even if like our latest show that we were able to perform live, well, besides Milo, was Marooned, a space comedy. And that was a lot more meditative and kind of slow-paced. And, it's about an astronaut who's crash lands on an uncharted planet and can't get home. And so it's a lot of attempts to get home. And they're a lot more sort of somber tones of isolation and longing and loneliness and how to get home. There's still a lot of humor interspersed in there, but it's not as fast-paced and upbeat like as Milo.
But kids still loved the show, even though there were quieter moments or moments where that might have been a little more ominous with regard to the astronaut's trajectory towards her attempts to get home, misfires, missing family, looking at old photos of family members on planet Earth where she is not. And there are these elements that seem to be treating darker, sort of more human themes, not more human, I mean to say darker themes. But the reality is that for children, the world is also a place that can be dark and uncertain, where they feel lonely sometimes, where they want to go home, or and they can't, or certain concepts that seem so easy for adults to talk about and understand are so beyond comprehension simply because developmentally they're unable to understand. And there's a way, we're speaking a lot about Marooned right now, but I've found it so fascinating after how many kids would stay and ask questions.
Mm-hmm. And I think Marooned, like Milo, Milo is completely wordless. Marooned has some text, but it's mostly wordless, and we're just such big fans of wordless theater, especially wordless puppet theater, because it just lets the audience have one more level of projecting their own experience and their own empathy onto whatever they see is happening on stage.
Yeah, no, that's so important, I think, and it lends to the strengths of the puppet. Something that this is kind of combining a bunch of things that we've been talking about, but because earlier in our conversation you mentioned how, if the audience was going to be or if you wanted to do the same show every time for different audiences, you might as well just record it and you play it for them like a movie. And something that this all is making me think of, as I imagine, take Milo from a maybe a school time performance where you have a lot of younger kids to I know you've performed like at late night slams or something like the O'Neill. Something that must be great about a show like that is being able to emphasize different notes depending on who is in the crowd. I know we've talked with Joshua Holden about this, not on the show, but just personally, and how he's able to take the Joshua show and sometimes kind of emphasize the more slightly kiddie moments, or if that you're just playing to a house of adults, like, okay, we're gonna kind of hit the more sardonic and funny things that work on those multiple levels, because it's just a bunch of people who are in the know. And I imagine that must be one of the many really fun things about doing a show like Milo, is being able to stretch those moments depending on who's in the crowd.
Interesting. I think there's some other variety type acts where we talk a bit more. We have like the Bird Family Band, where we're sort of a country family band with that does like a song and dance kind of act. And we have a little baby bird. It's a baby doll body with a bird head, and it sings songs with us. And in that situation, we are able to play a little more like, oh, who's the audience? We'll banter a bit more. I feel like Milo, pretty much the beats of it and things we emphasize are the same every time. And we'll certainly still feed off of the audience. But to your point of, is it a room full of kids or is it a room full of puppeteers at a festival? Their energy feeds each other and feeds the energy in the room. So if it's a bunch of kids who are really into one thing, even if we're hitting the same choreographic beats at the same moment, they're responding to different things, and it's creating that different enjoyment in the room, as opposed to like if it's a room full of puppeteers who they may be responding of like, oh, I see that technical thing they did. That's very clever. Like.
I appreciate how that head has to move in different ways to, get different, emotions and stuff. And suddenly, you're watching the Rolodex of the different expressions that Milo gets on his face or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a double-edged sword performing at a puppet festival is.
I can imagine. Have you guys done many like school performances and stuff, or not really?
That's a good question. Yes and no. We have had a number of experiences with school-age children. More often than not, we'll be billed as a family program at a festival in which the majority of the audience is coming out are families. There'll be adults and children, but it's sort of geared toward, this would be a good thing that the kids can enjoy too.
Yeah, I think most of the school-age audiences that we've performed to have been part of like an extracurricular either activity or assembly or anything. We don't go as much into like schools as part of a presentation.
Well, yeah, then I have a question about that too. Then just because one thing that I've noticed, and maybe you haven't noticed because of the venues you've been in, because you talk about that relationship between the audience. And one thing that I've noticed, again, more so with my magic shows and doing those over the years, I still do them every once in a while. But I've noticed a humongous change in that younger audience in the way that they watch a live show. And I think it is because they are more so exposed to video media where you don't react. You don't clap at a movie or a video that plays. You don't cheer for it or something like that. And I've noticed that it's a much generally less responsive and quieter audience, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not, because a lot of times I'll get the email from the parents once I get home saying like, oh my gosh, they can't stop talking about it. I'm like, really? It seemed like they weren't that responsive.
Wow, I know this phenomenon. I recognize what you're saying. This is also something that'll happen for us with adult audiences for like a Friday evening show, where one night the laughter is just reverberating off the rafters. The next night it's so quiet, and as the performer you're thinking, did I miss a beat? I think this is the show that was last night. It feels so different. And then I'll often look out in the crowd and there's smiles on all the faces. You just have a crowd that's not as vocal, or they are laughing, but it's more to themselves. It's not the hearty har that will project into the theater space. I mean, this is also how audiences influence one another. If you have someone who is more confident, less self-conscious about letting their laugh be big and bold, then you'll have more people that'll come out of their shell and let their laughs be bigger and bolder. And now in terms of the children, or I don't mean to digress. You have a point?
I'm just thinking, like, Sarah and I still do fairly frequently, like, gigging actors working with other theaters, getting hired on and doing shows. And one of the groups we love to work with is Imagination Stage here in Bethesda, Maryland. And we were doing a 2-person and a musician, so 3-person show that's very interactive with the kids. It's for their Theater for Young Audiences series. And so rather than like, or Theater for the Very Young, I can't remember exactly what they call it, but it's basically a trend in theater where the intended audience range is like 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, as opposed to like children's theater, which may be any group of like elementary kind of school age kids. So a lot of these kids, it's their first experience with theater. They're still learning the rules of how to react. And many of the shows are very directly interactive, asking them questions, giving them objects so they have the tactile sensation. We love doing those shows. And one of the most difficult things in the world is like pre-show when the kids are coming in and the teachers and chaperones are walking along and telling them like, okay, you need to be quiet. You need to sit on your hands. Don't say anything. And we're like, oh God, no, don't, like, please don't give us that obstacle. So it might be the same thing, Adam, of like, before your show, who knows what the conversation was in the hallway or the classroom of how do we act when we see a performance? Yeah. We be quiet. We applaud at the end. You know?
Yeah. Well, I imagine at a festival and stuff, you wouldn't do what I'm about to say, but do you ever just come out as yourselves and almost as a warm-up and kind of explain who you are and what you do in any way?
The only time we've done that is when we do sensory-friendly performances where we'll come out unhooded. So we'll have our puppeteer hoods off so our faces are visible and introduce ourselves, our names, and even do a little short demo with 1 or 2 puppets explaining how they're done. Yeah. Lights are in the house are up pretty high during the run of the show. But beyond that, we'll sort of like Sarah said, show us without our hoods, show that we'll be putting on hoods, show them what it looks like there, just so that there aren't any confusing surprises or anything. But we don't really come out beforehand and sort of teach them the rules. We like to think that like the first, minute or 2 of the show is teaching the audience the rules. Yeah. Milo comes out very timid, very quiet, which makes the audience quiet. They're not sure what to expect, so they're all quiet. They see him nervous. He really timidly makes a connection with them.
that sort of starts this motion, and then by the time he rings the bell and ta-da's, then the audience knows immediately, okay, yeah, that's our Pavlovian response of when to applaud.
That's great.
That's
Oh
so
my
good.
gosh.
Something else I was thinking about, and I wonder if you have thoughts on this, is that you guys both had the opportunity to sort of be human actors for a time, and then you were in shows where the puppet was kind of brought in, as you mentioned, as like, okay, this scene is going to have this, here is why this scene necessitates having this puppet, this object be performed, and you guys as sort of puppetry outsiders able to say, oh my gosh, that's wonderful, I love why we are incorporating this element, let's now try to find new opportunities to do that, versus as you said, some puppeteers who just think, I'm a puppeteer, so I got to do a puppet show, and maybe don't have those reasons for like, oh, this is why, this answers the question, why puppets. I wonder if you guys have ever thought of that, and if that's the same kind of appreciation for the tool and things that you want to be conscious about as you're devising these different performances that you do.
Right.
Yeah, I think that question, why puppets, is something we're always asking ourselves. I think it's a great question. It's so vital, because if you're doing a puppet show, if you're doing dance, if you're doing a wordless show, all of those need to be justified why you made that choice. It shouldn't be sort of a wheel of chance where you spin it and you say, okay, this project we're doing a Western that's a ballet. Like, that may be an interesting devising point to jump off of, but if you're doing a puppet show, why is it vital that puppets be used? What do you gain from that? So that's definitely something that we always ask ourselves. We always try and our big thing is magic and wonder, whether that be literal magic tricks like Milo, or just the magic of okay, we're creating a base reality with this puppet, and it's a stand-in for us as the audience, and then all of a sudden it can do something that is impossible for a human actor to do. That's something that we always come back to.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. How many different acts do you have with Milo now?
It's
That's a good question. We have a couple different 7 to 10 minute slam versions. We have a 4-minute version. We have the full length, which is about 40 minutes.
It's so funny because, like, Milo had to start in those like 5 to 7 minute slam length versions. So a few of those were made, and then they were combined and added new elements for the full length show. But then the full length show itself, that was premiered in 2017, and it's been rearranged and condensed probably 5 or 6 times since then.
Improved, new puppets, added characters.
Yeah.
Even the last time we got to do the show was at the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta, which was the last live show they were able to have before they had to shut down for quarantine. And it was our last live performance, too, with a live audience. And we had tried out a totally new sort of reconfiguration of the show just for that theater that we were really happy with.
The benefit of having been able to perform the show so as often as we have is that we've really been able to learn it and learn it with the audience. The audience is the greatest teacher, and those moments when the laughter would build and build and then the wave would go off to the next felt so satisfying, and the moments when it would build and then plateau a little bit and then get lost a little bit and then recatch, we would talk often about, what is that plateau? Is it because maybe we're not progressing this gimmick to the next level, or we're not being true to the thread that we established at this part of the sequence by following it through to the end, really engaging in the meat of how it works, how comedy works, and allowing that to inform changes, and being able to have ownership of the material means that we can let it grow as we are growing with it.
That's one of the most difficult things about doing sort of traditional theater after doing either devised theater that you yourself created and have ownership over, or a puppetry piece that you created and have ownership over, is that like in traditional theater, once that show opens, everything is locked down, right? Like depending, even if you're like an equity actor or something, there are specific rules where the director can only give notes twice during the run once that show is opened. And it's like, if that's a new show, like you learn so much in that run. Like I can't imagine, I mean I can because we do it with other theaters, but like opening a show and then saying, no, we have to stick with what we guessed the audience reaction would be in the rehearsal room, and we can't change from there.
Right.
Like, yeah.
You know, that's something I wanted to ask about, because you mentioned that your shows have so little text. Is like, do you guys have a formal scripting process that you do? Is it really just because you're able to, you know, you're together all the time, that you just run it and really have that internalized? And then, and this might be a separate part of this question, but then as you perform for audiences and you're learning about how those waves work and, you know, how to condense and things, do you guys record your performances and watch them afterwards to be able to self-critique, or are you just present enough that you guys are able to recall? How does that whole process of editing and devising work for you?
Yes, great question. So first part script, yes, we do have scripts, although it's more like what I imagine it would be notating the beats of a choreographic piece.
Mm-hmm.
They're the sections that are broken down into segments, and what transpires in those sections, what puppets are involved, maybe a little bit about the emotional trajectory. This is where he is nervous because of this switching to this face, thinking of Milo. For sometimes it's also musical, that'll be that section set to that music. There is a documentation in the script, and then beyond that, we film ourselves when we rehearse, so that we have that feedback that we can really analyze. For focus is really important to us, especially when we have more than one puppet on the stage, so that one is not taking the attention from another at a point where we really need the audience's focus in that direction.
Yeah.
And so determining split focus is important in terms of filming, and also just clarity. Certain movement is not useful to a particular puppet, and knowing what it looks like is so you're working with a mirror is also really great if you have a big enough mirror.
Yeah.
One of the scripting things, we always try and script it at least to the point of where we can hand it off to a third-party tech person.
Oh, sure.
So that it at least has the beats when the shadow puppet rabbit appears, then change to, you know, lighting Q3. And that's one of the things we learned too, doing slams, is like, especially if you're starting out in puppetry and you're a solo performer or you're a duo performer, keep your tech as simple as possible, because like whoever's running the slam will love you. Like if you don't have like 15 light cues in your 5-minute piece, and you bring in your audio on vinyl, and you're like, can your system play this? Then like, that's gonna drive them crazy. If you can just show up and be like, I just need one look, I run my sound on stage if there is sound, like that's gonna be great. And it's gonna be so much easier for you to get plugged into other slams, other festivals. It means you don't have to travel with a tech person, so it keeps your costs down.
Right.
It's just so good.
Well, and it's even a great thing, and this is actually one of the things that Bo was really touting about you guys, is that he was like, if you ever need a last minute thing, he was like, it's great because they, you know, everything is self-contained from a tech standpoint. It's lights up, lights down, and it's perfect because it's exactly what you need in that pinch. And so I think it's even something that is from a producing standpoint. If you're able to be appealing to people who are creating those shows and putting a roster together.
And even from a performance standpoint, it's got to be reassuring too. Because again, same thing with my own magic shows. Once I bought my own sound system, I was so much more comfortable than relying on whatever was in the building. Because sometimes it was great, and sometimes it was a big problem.
Right? And like, what kills a show more, like, as an audience when I'm watching a show and there's somebody else running tech, to have the magician or the puppeteer like take a pause and look up in the back and like go like that.
It doesn't make anybody look good.
Right?
Next cue, please.
Next cue. No, wait. Go back. It's like, oh my God. Oh boy.
Absolutely.
Also, in that producer standpoint of like how easy is your show for producers, like for anybody who's listening that's like making new work right now and they want to be as adaptable as possible, a really good exercise is to think of like, okay, I just made a 10-minute piece and I love it and it's perfect. Can you make a 7-minute version of that piece and still have it just as great? Can you make a 2-minute version of that piece? And like, think of what those different iterations look like. Because some slams that you're going to sign up for are like, yeah, you only have 2 minutes and you need to get on and off stage as quick as possible. Yeah. So like, don't just do like, okay, I'll do this 2-minute chunk. Think of like, okay, overall, what is the essence of your scene? What's the game of your scene? How can I distill that down so it's still super clear and it doesn't feel rushed? It just feels like a perfect 2-minute scene.
There's a quote we reference a lot by Fred Astaire, who got his start in vaudeville: "Work it till it's perfect, then cut 2 minutes."
Yeah.
I love that.
We talk
That's
about
so
that
great.
all the
That's so
time.
great.
Yeah, like, kill your darlings and
right.
like, even if you think it's perfect, it can probably still get trimmed. And
Yeah, what's the motto for the pub shows?
Too short to suck.
That's right. Too short to suck.
That's so great. Now, do you guys do a similar approach for your other performances? I'm thinking like something like Marooned or Homebodies, where yes, it's the full show, but I want to be able to take it and do a 2-minute trailer, so to speak, in places. Do you guys kind of keep that in mind as you're devising those more standalone pieces?
Yeah, we tend to build all of our works as we sort of refer to them as pods. So like, here's this this little pod that can basically stand alone, and you don't need to know the full scope of the show. Sometimes if we're doing it just as a pod, we'll adjust it a little bit to give you context of maybe what happened before, what happened after. But most of the work that we make is in those like standalone pods, which is also super convenient if you want to rearrange the order of things, where it's like, oh yeah, we need the distress phone calls in Marooned to come earlier because we want to feed that in, or later. Yeah.
I love that. That's so great. Something else I wanted to ask you about, because I love your design aesthetic. I think so many of your puppets, you could just tell that came from your workshop. But something that I also notice about it is that it seems to be influenced from the Fedig books. And I think we've talked about that. That's something that you have as an influence. Do you can you talk about finding that and how or why you've kind of incorporated that into the puppets that you create?
Yeah. So Hans-Jürgen Fettig was a huge influence for me, and I didn't even know about him until that 2015 Yukon festival that you all were at too, when they had the Naked Puppet exhibit.
Yeah, Heidi Rugg put together a really great exhibit. You could go up and pick up every one of the puppets and stuff and just see how it was all created. It was so cool.
Oh my gosh, it was so cool. Like she got a bunch of puppeteers together. They each sort of like took a design from this kind of mech and puppet design Bible. Hans-Jürgen Fettig wrote at least 2 books that I know of, Rod and Tabletop Puppets and Rod and Hand Puppets, I believe, or Tabletop and Hand Puppets. Don't quote me on that. But and so they take these illustrations or descriptions, make sort of a naked puppet version, so it's not covered in anything. Everything is exposed. Here's sort of an example of like a universal nod head turn mechanism. Those of you listening on the podcast version, you'll have to check out the video.
Yeah.
But learning about these kind of mechanisms was such a rabbit hole for me of how mechanically how to get the movement you're looking for in the simplest way possible, and then letting that movement inform the character too. So being able to create a controller that's ergonomic, a movement that's natural, and then playing with that and then figuring out who the character is based on that. And then a big thing too of Fettig's design are starting with simple shapes, right? He never really got into super realistic puppets. It was always, keep it abstracted, keep it stylized, because you're creating a heightened stylized version of life or a character. So like this is like a paper mache egg that then on the lower half is a cardboard paper toilet paper tube that was cut at an angle to create the basic head shape, and then a couple super simple shapes for the features.
Yeah. It reminds me also a little bit of like an Albert Roser approach with the paper sculpture too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then so we created sort of a similar thing for World Puppetry Day. We sort of got in the workshop and just played around with some shapes that we had around.
I love that.
Yeah, I was just watching that video today again in preparation, and I remember seeing that when it came out. It was such a fun idea.
Thanks. Yeah, it's all about like, I'm sure you talk about it in your art classes, Adam, which is like set yourself limitations, and figure out what you can do within those limitations. So with this, it was like, okay, I have a bunch of cardboard mailing tubes. If all I can do is cut a tube at any given angle and glue it on, then what can you create with that? Like I know as a builder, I get super obsessed with learning new techniques, and sometimes you get to a point where you have a character idea in your head and you're like, oh yeah, I need to sculpt that out of clay, and I want to make a mold, and I want to do a casting so that I can control every detail, every aspect of it. But I think it's so much more interesting to give yourself limitations and say,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Like cut a tube, glue it on, let that inform.
Well, because not only that, because one of the hardest things as an artist to start with is a blank page, and like having limitless options and giving yourself that kind of restrictions can force you to be creative in ways you otherwise wouldn't have. But one thing I just want to mention too for people listening and watching at home, sometimes I have people email me like, oh, I can't find this book. Technically, the book is called Hand and Rod Puppets: A Handbook of Technique, and it's by Hans Fettig, and Fettig is spelled Fettig. For people who want to check it out. The used book is for sale on Amazon for the low price of about $300. So just out of, because it's a very rare, hard book to find, which is why that price is so high. Do you actually have a physical copy of it?
I don't have a physical copy. One of my favorite things about touring is that we get to visit a lot of puppet theaters that have a library, and that's one of the first things we look for is whether they have a copy, and we'll always look through it. It's so fun.
I remember years ago, before, and I wouldn't do this now, but I was thinking about, I was like, I rented it from the library. I was like, I wonder what they charged me if I lost it.
Oh my
and
God!
Then it was,
I think a bunch of versions got taken
it was
that way.
Same. It was the replacement price, which was the $300. I was like, oh no, no, that's okay. You can have it back.
I've got a scanner.
Yeah,
Right.
That's right. Yeah, I did. I got a PDF of it.
There's a Facebook group, the Fedig Project, and it may be listed somewhere else too, but somebody basically put a scanned copy of the book up.
Yep.
And the publishers, whoever owns the publishing rights for it, saw it, and they were like, you know what? Because it's out of circulation, we'll be fine with you sharing this PDF as long as you're not making a profit off of it. So that could always, if you want to drop that in the link, maybe you could set up a Dropbox thing or a Google Drive thing where people can download it.
It's down on our on our
That's
page
good.
right now.
That's good to know because I scanned it myself. I got a pretty good copy too. So maybe
nice,
nice. That link there too.
Yeah, it's super. I keep a copy downloaded on my phone, and sometimes when we're on tour and I'm like laying in bed at night, I'll be like, look at that. Like, that's my bedtime reading.
It is. It's just even if you don't, 'cause I don't think I've ever like verbatim, really used an exact technique from that book. But you're right. Anytime I'm looking for inspiration, you just, again, even if you don't use that idea, it gets the wheels turning, seeing these, these really interesting ideas and the great illustrations in there that are very practical. To be honest, I don't know if I've ever read a word in the book. I pretty much just look at the pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. The first time I got it, I just looked through the whole thing, pictures, then went through again, found a picture that I liked, then read that section. I still haven't read everything. It's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think that's a really good technique too of if you're a puppet designer, don't spend a ton of pre-production time with sketches and initial drawings and everything. I'm much more of a fan of create a loose sketch, then get in the workshop and start building and let things inform how they want to look.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so much fun to if you have a commission, them giving you some artistic freedom as opposed to them handing off a rendering and being like, make this exactly.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, you can see that in a lot of your work, the element of play in the building process that you have, which I've seen in a lot of your videos, which actually is making me. I think I wanted to ask this. I love the little opening animation video that you have for all your videos. Was that just made for that, or is that a piece of something?
That was just made for the intros. I thought it'd be a fun project to sort of work on. We even have on our channel sort of the making of those puppets too, that shows a little behind the scene, the carving of it and working out some of the mechanisms.
It is so cool.
Yeah.
It's perfect, and it's very much on brand for you guys. I just want to tell you how cool I think that is.
I was going to say, I love a good title card. And that's it's so true to form for you guys. It's just it's a really beautiful little short film, if you want to call it that.
Oh my gosh. Well, we started making YouTube videos about 2 years ago or so, and Adam, you've been making them for a long time, and I'm sure you experienced the same thing, which is you set out to make one, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll set up my phone or something, and I'll make the video of the thing that I want to do, and then you start falling down that rabbit hole of well, this video was really quiet, so I need music, so now I'm going to learn about basic music production. And, oh, well, that one felt like it was a little too slow paced. Let me learn about editing. And so you end up learning about all these different skills that you never thought you would totally get into, but then you really geek out about.
Yeah, no, and it helps if you have any interest and aptitude for that, because that also is what ends up being the turnoff for people into making those types of videos. Because hey, I got into this just to film making puppets, and now I'm spending 60% of the time in the editing room, which is not puppet building. So
right.
That's where it's kind of been a good experience for me because I do enjoy that process as long as it doesn't become too much. I don't like doing too much of any one thing, Too much puppet building drives me a little stir crazy too. So that's why it's nice to sit down and do the editing after a while. So yeah, as long as you have interest in it, it's it becomes fulfilling.
Yeah. It's also it's a part of the work, as much of a joy as this enterprise is of creating puppet theater. There's no denying the labor that's involved in this kind of production, knowing that just like rehearsals for a live show, those are time consuming and they require a great amount of attention and energy and a willingness to be flexible, to think outside the box, even if you've already rehearsed it and performed it a certain way, allowing for change. It's similar to the work going into these films. If you want to make a quality piece that supports whatever the film is, how-to, tutorial, short puppet film, anything, it's going to take that labor behind the scenes of editing and doing that work. And I guess I mean to say that there's a depth to what we do as theater makers and puppeteers, all of us on this call and beyond listening. That's hard, and to acknowledge that it is hard is, I think, important just as much as we can acknowledge the joy of it and acknowledge how much worth it the hard moments are, because it allows the celebration of the success of the great video or the success of the show with its first audience that much more gravity, because you have invested so much to get to that point.
Yeah, we think a lot about, and the audience isn't going to see all that work. They're not going to see the hours that you spend watching tutorial videos about how to edit so that you can edit something that looks super simple. They're just going to see the result.
Right.
And we often talk about, again, at that 2015 Yukon conference, we took a marionette design workshop with Fred Thompson.
Yeah.
Fred, if you're listening to this, get on the show. You're brilliant.
Yes.
I love you.
We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Fred Thompson is just a gem, and we love him so much. And one of the things that really stuck out in that workshop, two things really. One, he was talking about a marionette that he built, and he was showing us, it had this sort of raffia.
The hag?
Yeah, the hag. Mm-hmm. And so it has this raffia sort of skirt. And he sort of pulled it aside and showed us these beautifully carved calves, right? They were really wonderfully shaped. The jointing was great. The hips were great. And he said, nobody's ever going to see these calves as far as the audience goes, but he knows they're under there. And so it's that work, that attention to detail that when he knows work has been put in and attention to detail has been put into a piece, that affects his performance, and the audience picks up on that, even if they don't know that that's what they're picking up on.
That's the thing, too, is you may not get the immediate gratification of the audience seeing that work, but they are picking up on it on a subliminal level because clearly that work has been put into it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we talk about that all the time. It's this very important, very subtle, nuanced aspect. People are so smart. Audiences are the smartest. We use this expression often, tout savoir. You see all. When you put a show on the stage, they will pick up on everything, even what is not visible to the naked eye.
Oh, yeah.
They will be gleaning actively. If
you have a little hiccup in your show and your face is visible and you have that little, they see everything. Just fake it till you make it, do it with confidence. They don't know what the show's supposed to be.
But just the kind of holistic approach to puppet building. You consider all aspects, and
yeah. The other thing that, speaking of Fred Thompson and that festival, one of the things that he said towards the end was, after talking about all these building techniques, all these jointing techniques, he basically left us with, but what are you going to do with it? You can spend all your time in the workshop building the most beautiful, perfect puppet, but unless you're doing a show with it, like, is it really a puppet? Like, if you just build this beautiful sculpted object that you never perform with in front of an audience, that you put the work in, is it a puppet?
No, yeah, it's absolutely true, Yeah.
Yummy questions indeed. We shall be chewing on them for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely. No, that's so true. And I think that speaks to the need for puppeteers to be doing all of those things. Like, yes, there are puppet builders who just do that, or performers who just do that. But it's something that we admire so much about folks like you, that you do every part of the process, and you're able to know that and feel that, even if it's on a subliminal level, that it speaks to the work.
And I don't mean to poo-poo puppet builders with what I just said of, like,
oh, no, of
yeah,
course.
what
Adam's
are you going to do with it?
Oh yeah, no, I'm totally, yeah. No, I think that all the time. You do.
No,
You
yeah.
see, even just going through Instagram. Oh, that's a beautiful puppet, but I wonder how it moves. Like how well does it work? Because there's so many layers to really any performing arts form, especially one that involves these types of tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
Great point.
and if you're a puppet builder out there listening in the workshop right now, like, keep on doing that great thing. And if you're handing it off to a performer, like, the more, again, attention to detail is in that puppet that you hand off to them, or the more ergonomic you can make a mouth plate or a controller, the longer they'll be able to rehearse with it and give a better performance of what you created.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
so great. Well, that is a really lovely place to kind of end this first conversation with you guys. And I'm sure there are lots of people working in their shops right now, or driving around in their car, who've taken so much value from this conversation. So we thank you so much for that. But as we wrap up, we know you're both big fans of Mr. Jim Krupa. We were wondering if you had a good puppeteer story that you could leave us with before we head off.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Also, if you're listening in your workshop, wear your respirator and your eye protection. Puppeteer story. I think we each have one, and then we also have an Alex and Olmsted combined one.
Great.
My puppeteer story was, I mentioned before, Imagination Stage, the children's theater. I got to work on this incredible production of the BFG, Roald Dahl's The Big Friendly Giant. And a lot of the times when companies do that show, the way they deal with the giants is they have the little human girl, Sophie, switch down to a tiny version, and then have the human actors be sort of the forced perspective scaled up giants. But for this one, they wanted human Sophie and big 14-foot tall, like, backpack puppet giants. The puppets looked super amazing. They were great. It was a really great effect. But the show ran a long time. It was, several weeks, and it had like a workshop performance before then. And you guys know, anybody listening knows, puppets break. So towards the end of the run, some of the big puppets were breaking on stage. And so the puppeteers started going on stage with, like, a pocket full of black zip ties, so that, when I'm out there on the BFG's left arm and his arm breaks at the shoulder, I can really quickly reach up there, grab it, grab a zip tie, fix it on stage during the show, and just keep going.
Oh my goodness.
It was always an adventure.
Living on the edge.
Yeah, I'd say. And were those puppets that you built, Alex, or were they?
No, those puppets were built by Eric. I want to say Eric Wright, but
okay.
that may be incorrect. Yeah.
That's cool.
Your puppeteer story, Sarah?
Yes, one of our shows actually. It was a moment when this robot
Oh, I have the robot right here.
gets legs. And we'll show you the robot here. This is Ada, the autonomous task assistant.
Yeah, so this is Ada, and she sort of has a blink mechanism there. She also has some lights going on that'll turn on.
Well, was this for Marooned?
Yeah, so this was for Marooned.
That's beautiful.
And it's a very Krupa-inspired mech of the trigger and slider doing top and bottom lid separate control.
Yeah.
In the story of the show, it starts off after the crash. We do a little puppet show with a miniature rocket that goes into space and crashes, and then the curtain opens, and I'm on the ground along with Ada. It's uncertain whether she was a part of the ship or part of the what part of the ship she was. But essentially, there's a traumatic moment when I find out of the scrap of a Voyager on the planet these pieces that then can function as her legs, and we have this dance sequence where we dance together with her legs in celebration. And as soon as she got the legs on, one of them broke. Our final performance of the run, one of these legs broke, which really shifted the narrative arc of this moment.
Because like 20 minutes later, there's a scene where her legs break, it's a dramatic moment.
So I won't get into the nitty-gritty details of how we made it work. But there was a lot of sweating, a lot of breathing. This is a great reminder to all out there, whether you're in your workshops with your respirators and eye protection, or you're about to go backstage or do a live stream show. Breathe.
Breathe. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. And I, as I mentioned with Alex, when he told his puppeteer story, living on the edge. You are so alive in moments like that. We made it. We somehow made it work. And afterwards, there were no. We didn't say anything, but there were no comments from the audience along the lines of "that was a confusing moment" or "was that supposed to happen?" It was as if it was meant to be. Yeah. So
that's great. Well, yeah, and when they don't know what's coming next,
exactly,
you have that benefit.
And then our combined puppeteer story isn't a specific moment. It's more of a continuous series of events throughout our career, which we turned into an immersive site-specific show that we call Schlep. And Schlep is the show that we perform when we have to carry all of our puppet suitcases on tour through various cities and like roll 4 giant rolly suitcases down the cobblestone sidewalks of Denmark, or try and load into the back of a taxi in South Korea. So we usually announce performances of Schlep right before they happen, and you can only buy tickets in person.
This is our way of taking a moment of tears and turning them into a game. There's nothing we can do. We are going to be schlepping these enormously heavy objects in difficult situations for maybe the rest of our lives.
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about before. We were all talking about sort of the romance of the thing versus the reality. And nothing humbles you more. Like, you think, oh my God, this is so fancy. We get to go to Denmark to perform in a festival. Like, that versus waking up at 4 a.m. and being the only people on the road, walking suitcases literally over cobblestone to the train station in a town that you don't read the signs. Like, it's an adventure. Yeah.
It's an adventure, and we like to celebrate the work of it all. It's so much a part of life, and people don't tend to give the attention needed to these hard situations. And I really appreciate your puppeteers' stories and requests for those, to really get into the nitty-gritty of things being hard sometimes, but that doesn't mean we're not gonna do them. It doesn't mean we're too scared or too defeated. It's like they become these war stories that are so thrilling. Oh, a lesser man would have turned back, kind of thing. Like, no, no, they prevailed and the winds were blowing. And,
Right.
Yeah, that's such a
and
good
then
point because
sometimes
again, like I was saying before, like on Instagram, you always see on Instagram and social media, you only generally see the good things, the best parts of the show. But you're right; those I like that idea of war stories. They're important.
Yeah, our friend Stephanie, who's a puppeteer too. We talked a bit about doing Failure Fridays, where like every Friday, like sort of the puppeteer kind of philosophy of like post a picture of something that didn't go right. Here's the 8th version of this puppet that I made that was again a failed attempt, and what everyone has seen is the 9th version, which was the pretty version.
Oh, that's
like embrace those failures. Like I think it's so important to let especially beginning artists and beginning puppeteers see those failures all throughout the spectrum of performers, so that they don't feel like, oh, everything the first show that I have to do has to be perfect. My slam piece needs to be totally polished. No, just like make a piece, get it out there, let it be messy, learn from that, make another piece.
Right. No, it's that evolution.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
that's
So, what's the
wonderful.
best way for people to follow your work and learn more about what you guys are doing?
Well, you can go to alexandolmsted.com, and that'll have all our links there. You can also find us on YouTube at Alex and Olmsted, on Instagram, Alex and Olmsted,
Facebook, Alex and Olmsted, and Patreon.
patreon.com/Alex and Olmsted, which has been such a huge help, especially during quarantine when things have gone so crazy.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, yeah, thanks so much, guys, for coming on the show. It's been great to get to know you better and learn more about your work.
Yeah, and
Thank
best of
you.
luck with the Capital Puppet Festival
Oh, of
coming
course,
up.
yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks so
Absolutely.
much for having us. It was really fun talking to you.
So great to be together, you guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys. All right, bye.
An after-school activity called Odyssey of the Mind. Are either of you
Oh.
familiar with it?
You know what? About a year ago, we talked about. Excuse me. I'm gonna start that over again.
Take that again.
Thanks, Matt. That's going to be an edit point.
Can we all just do a little cough right now?
Yeah.
That's for the bonus content on Patreon.
Exactly.
Oh, there go my
Oh,
headphones.
all right. Bonus content.
That's the cough level.